Hi, I'm Al Gerner, Chief Strategist at Alani. We believe that Agile thought has evolved through 4 different generations of thinking. And we think this is particularly important to understand because it's almost a maturity curve for organizations as they progress through each of these 4 different stages. And also, oftentimes can tell you just exactly where you need to be in an organization depending upon your particular set of needs. Throughout the 1980s, traditional techniques started getting weaker and weaker. They eventually became rather barren for us by the early 90s. So long as the traditional development cycles were faster than the rate at which requirements were decaying, things worked just fine. But by the late 1980s, and certainly by the 1990s, the pace of change had accelerated to the point where requirements were just decaying far faster than we could respond in a traditional 12-month traditional development cycle. Clearly, by 1994, the world had changed. So we date the first generation of agility from roughly 1994 to about 2002. And in that first generation, the focus was on an agile development team and trying to find a fundamentally different way of building software. And we took simplifying assumptions. We assumed that we were dealing with small teams, modern technology stacks, had complete control over our environments, and had an intimate relationship with our product owners. Now, these were simplifying assumptions. That's not the way that the vast majority of the world worked, but it was effective because it did allow us to find a fundamentally new way of thinking about software development and how I relate to our business and our business customers. By 2002, we'd gotten very good at standing up Agile development teams. By the time that we drafted the Agile Manifesto and the 12 principles, we were very good at standing up good quality Agile development teams and realized then we could still fail. We realized that if we weren't really careful about developing good Agile requirements and feeding good stories into teams, and if we didn't have really good concentration on Agile testing, so that we could verify the acceptance criteria coming out of those teams, it didn't make any difference how technically proficient those teams were. Garbage in, garbage out. And so in the second generation of agility, we started realizing that Agile really wasn't about development teams. Agile was about product development flow. And from 2002 to about 2010, this is the period in which all the first books on Agile requirements management, on Agile testing, all the cross-fertilization between the Agile and the Lean communities, and all the discussions about Kanban first started. It's where Don Reinertsen's book on product development flow was written. It's when all the first automation tools for test automation and for build automation all came into existence in that period, 2002 to 2010. The second generation. And by 2010, we'd gotten very good at standing up good, effective, Agile product teams. And we could still fail. What we discovered was that as we satisfied our customers more, they got more and more ambitious. And they wanted bigger and more complex and more grandiose things. And that drove our complexity of our requirements and our backlogs and the size of the backlogs to astronomical proportions where we couldn't satisfy the need with a team of 7 plus or minus 2 people. Now it required 70 or 700 people in a single portfolio, in a coordinated set of teams to try to achieve those goals. And the third generation, where we start talking about enterprise agility, is driven by scaling. But not just by scaling. There is a second driver for the third generation. And the second driver is normalization. In the first and the second generation, when we were talking about Agile teams or Agile product development flow, Agile was always the exception to all the rules. They were the exception to all the governance guidelines. But by the third generation, we were succeeding and we were becoming the norm. And we now had to deal with things like, how do we make Agile normal? How do we deal with regulatory compliance? How do we deal with, project governance, financial governance? How do we deal with HR job descriptions that support the way that we Agilists work? And so from 2010, the third generation, which we're still in, grew up and we started talking about enterprise agility. In the last 2 years, however, 2015, 2016, we started to notice that there's a fourth generation that is forming, just now beginning to form, where enterprise agility takes on a different meaning. It's not enterprise scale in IT projects. It's taking agility to the rest of the enterprise, taking it outside of IT, taking it to the finance departments, taking it to corporate strategy, taking it to HR, and having them run their own operations in Agile styles as we prove that Agile is an effective technique. The other parts of the organization, the other parts of the corporations are starting to wake up and think, well, maybe this Agile thing could actually help us too. And so the fourth generation is also about enterprise agility, but applied outside of IT, truly to the entire enterprise. And these four different generations are almost a journey that organizations, particularly large organizations, the ones that I'm most interested in, because they're the ones that are the norm. They're not the first generation small teams with these simplifying assumptions. This is where the great majority of us are. This is an important insight. I'm Al Gerner, Chief Strategist at Alani, and we build Agile Enterprises.